Is that?
Yes.
Good?
Yes. So thank you very much. And let me bring up our next panel. As you can see here, it's from nice to have to must have, and what will it take? So joining us are, different companies here, but moderating would be Carl Sille, and Carl is a clinical and academic neurosurgeon with background in Parkinson's disease with gene therapy and neuromodulation clinical trial surgery, with early interest in IP generation, translation, and embedded objective measures. When I ran into Carl, he's done so much work in digital biomarkers for over 10 years now. So I was very thrilled to actually, and honored to have him join the ALS journey here and to participate in scaling these technologies and to broaden our clinical application to positively impact, clinical care and the digital biomarkers. So with that, I will invite Carl to moderate the session.
Well, thank you so much, Indu. Are you all able to hear me okay? Great. It's my real honor to be part of a fast-moving group that really wants to make a difference and take that right to patients, because I think a lot of us have had the experience that's been discussed and the opportunity to scale it. So in this session, we're going to talk about ensuring that AI delivers value, going from nice to have to must to have, and what it takes to deliver value in the treatment and identification of a cure for ALS and betterment for the patients. So in this panel, we will touch on AI-driven solutions, the challenges to scaling the technologies has been touched on already, ensuring clinical precision, maintaining it, usability and adaptability, and overcoming the regulatory hurdles. And then some highlights that we could take from other areas, cross-learning from successes in other areas. So one of the things that we're thinking about is that AI really should be a source of good. And we're hoping to hear from each of the presenters today how their company or their institution sees this AI as a force of good and benefit and how it's implemented. So it is my privilege to introduce our distinguished panelists, including Dr. Ernest Frankel, professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, renowned researcher in systems biology, with sophisticated work in computational and experimental approaches to unraveling complex biological networks with the goal of advancing precision medicine. By employing artificial intelligence to large-scale biological data, his team provides deeper insights into disease mechanisms. And in the realm of ALS, his contributions have been pivotal in identifying potential therapeutic targets and biomarkers, paving a way for personalized medical interventions in a way that could really advance and alter the disease. We're also joined by Dr. Alvaro Pascual-Leon, who is a professor of neurology at the Harvard Medical School and medical director of the Deanna and Sydney Walk Center for Memory Health at the Hebrew Senior Life. He has had a pioneering work in brain plasticity, non-invasive brain stimulation, and exploring neuroplasticity and promising avenues for treatments that potentially could find ways to monitor and slow the disease. We're also joined by Dimitri Starson, who is a leading expert in computer vision and applications in healthcare. There have been many discussions about nutrition, diet, and chemicals associated with neurodegenerative diseases, and his team has expertise in the development of tools that can monitor disease through visual access and even looking at visual biomarkers, including food and nutrition biomarkers. And Dr. David Sunderman-Uft, DSO, is the founder and CEO of Modality AI, a digital health company specializing in AI for data-driven platforms that communicate, interact, and can potentially track motor function and ALS and monitor things such as speech and other motor areas. So please join me in welcoming these distinguished panelists, and we will have probably abridge it a little bit if everyone could work, but we're supposed to have 10 to 25 minutes for the presentations and the remaining time, 15 to 25 minutes for Q&A. So we would invite Dr. Frankel to begin the session.
Hi, thank you very much for the very kind introduction. Let me see if I can get my slides to share. Let me know if you're seeing that. Someone? Yeah,
Yes.
the thumbs up. Excellent. So I'll try to keep this brief. I did want to give sort of as an academic an overview to some of the real issues and the concepts that we should be thinking about as we go through these talks, of course, mixing in a few results. So, where AI can and can't help. And I think that the first thing that I think we're all in society getting to be more and more aware of is how data hungry AI methods are. Right, and this has kind of broken out into the popular press from the academic literature with these lawsuits because to train something like ChatGPT, you need more data than's even available on the internet. And so there are all these copyright infringement cases because to train the models, the companies had to sort of dig into things that may be on the fringes of legality. So as we think about this in the context of ALS, where are the big data sets and where can AI make an impact? The next slide is some audio. If you don't hear anything, someone should shout and tell me, but hopefully it'll play.
Don't hear anything.
All right. Well, what that slide was an automated voice of mine that had been produced by totally free tools that you could access on the internet. And the point here is I used a large language model to write the text, and then I fed it into a large language model that produced automated voice. And it sounds not bad, quite honestly. It's a little bit flat, but it's really very good. And why can we make these synthetic voices so well? Because there's just so much audio data out there, right? And so that goes back to the key point. Where there's a lot of data, you can have a big impact. So where do we expect to have enough data, and what kinds of goals are we setting for ourselves? And so I think there are two goals that we should be thinking about. One is in biomarkers to monitor progression, but the other one is in subtyping the disease. And here, I think that the thing that we don't often talk about, but I think we all recognize at some level, is that ALS really isn't one disease any more than cancer is one disease. It's a clinical diagnosis that shares a lot of common symptoms and maybe some common mechanisms. And so if you look at the genetics, we all know that for the 10 or 15% of people with ALS, you can find genes that cause the disease, but there are a lot of different genes and they don't seem to fall into one common pathway. And the drug that's going to work, this tofersen, works for the SOD1 people, but will probably not work for any of the others. In terms of clinical presentation, it's been known for a century that it's clinically diverse. And then in terms of progression rate, you've got a decade or two of spread. So we need to think about how we can use AI to find subtypes. And that's something AI is really good at. It's the same way that AI can help figure out, what kind of movie you want to watch next or what you want to buy next to send you the right ads. So AI is very good at subtyping people if we can feed it enough data. So I've been privileged to work with a really great group of scientists in a program called Answer ALS that generated a lot of data from people living with ALS and controls. And there are about 1,000 people with ALS who participate in this program. And we collected their clinical data, took biofluids, and then from those from the blood, we're able to make induced pluripotent stem cells and generate a lot of neurons from that, and then put those through various kinds of omics. And that provides a rich place for data. Now, the size of the data set, it's still 1,000 people, which is nothing like the size of the internet of voice data or written data. So we're still in a regime where data limited, but we're getting in the right direction. And all these data are available if anybody has interest in this stuff from the Answer ALS. I think they're calling it Neuromine these days. So what we've been interested in is different ways that you can subtype ALS. You can go directly from the blood to blood biomarkers. You can make the blood into iPS cells and then to motor neurons and then do various kinds of omics. You can take those cells and do tests on them in the laboratory. And then, of course, we've got the clinical subtypes. So maybe I'll start with the clinical subtypes. Early on when we were studying ALS, we thought, oh, okay, we'll take the ALSFRS rating score We'll plot it for patients, and we'll separate our data from Answer ALS to fast progressing and slow progressing people, and it'll be pretty straightforward. And then we'll go do interesting stuff. And we discovered that that's actually a really hard problem because you don't see people for very long when they have ALS. So you've got a short period of data, and then the ALS rating score is based on questions that the answer may vary from day to day. So there's a lot of noise in the data. And when you're done, it's pretty hard to tell which of these people was actually the fast progressor and the slow progressor. So AI was very useful here. This is all published. We were able to then take I call this a spaghettigram. It looks like you threw spaghetti on the floor. Take the spaghettigram of ALS-FRSR trajectories for people in the Answer ALS study and use AI to group them into patterns. And these patterns had some interesting properties. You can see right away that most of them are highly nonlinear. And that's true in clinical trials as well. So these are data from the ceftriaxone trial that were available from the NIH. And you can see how highly nonlinear some of these patterns are. And obviously, it's going to have big implications for how you interpret results in clinical trials if you model things with a linear trajectory, but in reality, it's nonlinear. So that's AI directly applied to ALS-FRSR. The question is, can you do better than the ALS-FRSR? Because it's got a small dynamic range. So here we're showing the questions that are used for speech, right? It's a 0 to 4 scale. And it's not very granular. So there's no 3.4, 3.5, 3.6. And the scoring, as I've said, is subjective. So today you might be a 3, and then tomorrow maybe you're a 2. So I've been very fortunate to work with EverythingALS in this. Lyle, James, Kelly Norell from IBM, and a great team of people working directly for EverythingALS. And so we've been able to collect a very large data set. Again, size of data set is really the critical thing, gathered over more than a year, more than 1,000 hours of data, and then try to make some sense of this and see whether we can solve this problem. Lyle already used my analogy, so can we do better than the gold standard, right? We want to make the new thermometer, but we have to compare ourselves to sticking your hand in someone's forehead. So this paper is available on the archive because it's going to go through pretty quickly. But we said, okay, well, what can we do? Like, we need to do something, right? This is an urgent problem. And the idea emerged through talks with Lyle and James and others that, well, speech-language pathologists who work in the clinics with people with ALS actually have a rating scale that's better than the ALS-FRSR for this. It's listener effort. How hard is it for someone to understand a person with ALS when they're trying to speak? What's the point of speaking if not to be understood, right? And so we could use the listener effort. And what this paper shows is that when you have speech-language pathologists independently evaluate how hard it is to understand somebody, you get very, very consistent scores across the speakers. And over time, if you randomly resample the data and feed it to the listener at different intervals, they tend to score it with high consistency. And then we're in a position where we can use AI and see, well, can you take the person out of the loop and just use AI to predict it? And we get really, really nice results where we can show that we can actually use a totally automated process to take that speech and use it to quantify how hard it would be for a human being to understand them. So we're very excited about that as a potential way to improve on the ALS-FRSR. I'll zoom through these final things because I think they're a little bit less relevant to today's talk, but we've been able to use the multi-omics generated Answer ALS to find clinically meaningful signals in data from cells that were derived from cells, that were derived from blood, that was taken from the patients years before. And I think this is really super exciting to show that there's molecular signal that persists, and that's available here at this QR code. So that's already published. And then we have unpublished data where we take the blood directly and do untargeted metabolomics, and we can find subtypes that correspond to things that are present in the multi-omics from Answer ALS and also in the clinical data, and hopefully that'll be coming out in the not too distant future. So the last piece where we think ALI can make a difference is you take those cells that we've derived from the patients and put them into experimental conditions where maybe you can tell a difference between a person with subtype 1 and subtype 2 of the disease, and then use AI to that, and then come back and see if that relates to the subtypes that we're identifying in the clinical data or directly from the blood. So that was the quick overview. I hope that was fast enough. Just to summarize then, we think that AI has a big role, but it's going to be always limited by how much data we have. We're in a fortunate position when we can do remote data collection like EverythingALS did So that really opens up new possibilities for AI. And then, of course, from the Answer ALS study, where we've got all these cell lines in the lab. And I'll turn it back to our moderator.
Thank you very much for that really wonderful overview and really diligent and pioneering work integrating so much. And we look forward to the question and answer section. I'd like to invite now Alvaro to speak, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you so much, Carl, and thank you to Everything ALS for the opportunity. Let me see if sharing the slides works. So as you heard, I'm a professor of, can you see the slides okay, by the way? Yeah, thank you. As you heard, I'm a professor of neurology at Harvard Medical School, but I'm here also in representation of Linus Health, and want to tell you a little bit about the approach we're taking there to try to address the question of how can we leverage technology, neurotechnology in particular, to enable clinicians to do what we do better, to enable and empower patients to take control of their own situation, and to track things end to end from detection to wraparound care. The approach we have taken at Linus Health is to leverage digital diagnostics rather than reinventing wheels, capturing different signals with great precision, emulating a little bit what we might do as clinicians, have a sense of the picture of the pattern that the patient shows us, and do sort of pattern recognition to classify, but do so with more precision, hopefully, than what clinicians can do by leveraging the precision of the technology in capturing the data and the AI analysis of those signals to extract predictions for different aspects. And we try to do that with very easy, straightforward, short assessments in such a way that it might be particularly easy to integrate it in workflow. The idea behind it is not a new one, obviously, and it's something that you all share. We have been hearing about throughout the sessions. In neurological exam, in cognitive assessment with paper and pencil, we look at the output of what a patient is asked to do, and we know that there is limited sensitivity, but we also know that when an expert clinician does such an assessment, there is a lot of information that is extracted that Edith Kaplan in cognitive neuroscience, for example, conceptualized as pointing out that the key information that the expert clinician observer extracts is metrics of the process, rather than looking simply at the final result, is how the patient does what they do, that we capture signs in a more sensitive way. Of course, that's difficult to do because it takes a lot of years of training and practice and experience. It also requires the expert doing it. It's not something that can be easily scaled to having a medical assistant do the job. However, technology should enable that type of process metric capture with great precision in the hands of a relatively untrained person. Essentially, I like to think of it as putting the expert in a box, as it were. And that requires a lot of issues that Ernest has already pointed to in terms of validation of the process, of the analysis, and so on. But it provides at least a means for capitalizing on the power of technology in a way that I would argue to this day we haven't fully done. So what Linus is trying to do is capture not just one signal, but multiple different modalities of signals in an integrated platform to be able to, by integrating the signals from drawing and motor control of fingers, gait and balance, speech and language, or eye movements, to integrate a multimodal type of assessment. To highlight one of them, speech obviously illustrates the example of the approach rather nicely, and it's what a lot of the work in ALS has focused on so far through oral analytics. there are motor signs and motor components to the speech. There are respiratory components. There are cognitive and behavioral components. It's easy to capture, or relatively easy to capture in a mobile kind of way. And the richness of that signal can be then analyzed in such a way that it gives reliable, repeatable, scalable metrics in a manner that is faster and arguably more precise than what the even expert ear might hear. The idea, again, in order to make it not just an assessment, but actually something that can go from the academic development of a tool to the implementation in clinical trials and in clinical workflows, is to offer a platform that captures the signal, that provides the analysis and the metric of computation, and that returns the results in a way that can be repeatedly replayed by the clinician, can be modified, can be double-checked, and can be translated in actionable recommendations for the patients. So to give you a sense of the sort of overview and to get into the different components where we apply AI to get us back to the sort of topic, one can do remote evaluation on the phone or on the web, use AI to extract different engines of analysis for those multiple metrics captured and assess different aspects. The same can be applied in clinic screening in a way that can be scalable easily because of the need for minimal additional technology that people may not have, and because of the fact that it's not dependent on expert training. The clinicians can then replay it and reassess it. AI can also be used, and it's also being used by us, to personalize the recommendations in a way that translating the findings into actionable recommendations to the patient, their caregiver, or the clinicians, as well as to guide in a workflow manner the next steps, aiming to guide decisions regarding therapies or chronic care. In ALS specifically, just to wrap up and at least finish with a little bit of data, looking just at the speech vitals, which we've done, getting a breakthrough designation in ALS from the FDA, the findings, I agree with Ernest. I think at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we measure against the clinical standard and show not only that we can match it, but ideally outperform it. And in this case, we have evidence that we can outperform the ALS FRS-R, given the granularity and the greater sensitivity of the captured signals. And importantly, we can link it then to recommendations that are appealing to patients, that translate into better quality of life of patients, and that in a workflow that can be easily integrated in the clinic, not only in studies. Maybe I'll stop there just to give you an overview, and then we can expand on things in the questions that may come.
Thank you so much for that amazing work. It's really, really wonderful to hear that. We look forward now to hearing from Dimitri Starson and our next presentation, and we'll have time at the end for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me and for the opportunity to support EverythingALS and the ALS community. It's been just tremendous pleasure. So please let me know, are you able to see the presentation and to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yes, so let me share a little bit about myself and the company. So Passio AI, we are a spin-off from the Stanford Research Institute, SRI International in Menlo Park. We started the company by focusing our AI development on solving the challenge of nutrition tracking in fitness, healthcare, and several other industries. So as we all know, nutrition plays an incredibly important role in all diseases, in all healthcare, and especially in neurodegenerative diseases, ALS, Parkinson's, everything. But historically, all of the efforts around nutrition, they've kind of been random and not grounded in data, because data collection and understanding of what members are eating has been extremely, extremely difficult. It is still not easy, even with the AI tools, with the AI magic that I will share with you, but it is becoming easier and easier, and we are working every single day to address this. So we started the company with the plan, the vision to create AI-powered tools that make nutrition tracking and AI-powered nutrition coaching much, much easier. So let's make it easy to track, and let's give everyone an AI nutrition coach that will help them with optimizing their nutrition, getting answers about nutrition, and building truly personalized nutrition care regimens. So with the tools that we provide, my company, we provide components and fully functional modules that integrate into enterprise healthcare applications. Like EverythingALS, we've been very privileged to be working with Indu and Indu's team to integrate AI nutritionist capabilities into the EverythingALS app, and we will hopefully get it into the hands of the community in the coming weeks and months. But we power other healthcare applications, including our AI nutritionist is currently embedded in tools like Sydney Health by Elevance Health. We power applications from ShareCare and quite a bit of other applications in the health, both across healthcare and fitness and weight loss industries. So what these tools allow us to do is to improve member engagement, help members with understanding their nutrition, collect detailed nutrition reports, which are very important for all of those studies that other participants mentioned, right? So when you are collecting biomarkers, when you are collecting voice logs and analyze the evolution of patients' journey through their life, it's very helpful to collect data points on what patients are eating, and that's essentially what we help to do for the community. Collection of nutrition logs that can also be very important, as we know, in clinical trials, and understanding the interaction between what people are eating and what medications they are taking. And obviously, the next step after we do this understanding is to go and start creating treatment plans and care improvement plans. So from the to validate the importance of this, one of the quick short studies we did, we asked a few hundred healthcare professionals whether getting access to patients and member nutrition data could help them with creating better standards of care, better treatment plans. And the vast majority, over 90%, answered yes, but less than 14% of the population that we asked said that they had any visibility. So we know that there's this just massive gap between what people are asking for, and is it just me? There's a little bit of
If everyone could please check their microphones are muted, please.
Thank you. All right, let me move on. So there is this massive gap that the tools that we adventured to create are filling. And so with the AI, there are several things that we are able to do right now that's not been possible really historically. First, from the nutrition tracking perspective, the entire food tracking industry initially was rooted in manual diaries and very, very kind of surface level surveys. Now with AI, a person can enter their meals in some cases almost automatically. In some cases, you can just put a camera in the kitchen and it tracks everything you eat. But on a less intrusive way of doing this is to provide people with a nutrition tracking app, which allows several modes of data entry, from computer vision to voice logging to manual search. That essentially covers all of those modalities. And I will show a set of quick demonstrations where we develop this technology. You can log your meals right now with just a photo, or with a real-time video. You just point your phone at the food and it scans all of the foods in front of you. Or you or your caregiver can talk into the phone and say what you had in a day, and it logs, creates the full log just from the voice. So we've been trying to perfect this technology for many, many years. And as you can, as you know, there's a lot of complexity in this. Like, this is a very, very simple example. We snap a picture and it basically tells us a recipe. But imagine what happens if there are uncertainty about what's inside of the food. So here, for example, if we take a photo of a burrito, AI needs to know, to be smart enough to ask what kind of burrito this is. And so here it clarifies, is it a pork burrito or is this a chicken burrito? So basically thinking through those degrees of complexities, like another example would be taking a photo of a cup of coffee. It recognizes, it knows that this is coffee, but for real nutrition log, the important part here is to ask, did you add sugar into the coffee? So at Passio, with our effort, we've thought through and went through all of those edge cases. Many people want to scan their logs on Sunday, create the entire meal plan. Some people log one by one. Some people log the entire plate with food. And that's essentially the tool that we are that we created and integrated into the everything, and are actively integrating into EverythingALS app. Another mode of input is voice. About 50% of people are logging with computer vision. Another half is logging with voice, where you can narrate your entire meal or your entire day of food with amounts, with times of when you ate them. And it basically, AI right now analyzes and creates the food log and adds this log into the system. And what we combined in our tools, both giant databases and different ways of tracking. And after the when members actually are able to track their nutrition, the next step is for them to start modifying their nutrition. For example, for the ALS community, there is an assumption that Mediterranean diets or diets rich in omega-3 can be helpful. And so what we are starting to create with our registered dietitians and with the treatment community, create a variety of meal plans that patients are able to adhere to, and in combination with prescriptive meal plans, prescriptive journeys, and tracking of what patients are eating and tracking of other biomarkers, hopefully over time, we will finally be able to answer a question: what is an optimal diet for an individual? Not for a category of people, but for an individual, and optimizes on an individual basis. And the last component of why it is so important, again, to create those personalized plans and to create studies, to create the better understanding of the outcomes based on nutrition, it is important not just to collect data, but to properly present it and share it with the medical community, with the research community, so that if we are tracking blood biomarkers, if we're tracking voice biomarkers and then different outcomes, another very, very important piece of data is nutrition. And that's essentially what we are excited to bring into the world. And I believe that this is becoming not just a nice to have, but a must have, because as all of us know, nutrition plays a vital, major role in in the care and in the outcomes and in what we can do to support the ALS community. So thank you. I would be excited to take questions during the Q&A session.
Thank you very much for that amazing and wonderful work. There's so much that can happen with that, and I look forward to the questions. Next, David, we'd like to hear from your presentation, please.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the invitation. We've been partnering with EverythingALS since 2020, so it's a significant privilege for us to talk a little bit about what we've been doing with them. We focus as modality also on multimodal assessments. That's why we are called modality, and specifically on the support of clinical trials in ALS and other related diseases. As you know, many of the clinical trials, specifically drug trials, fail these days. That's something which, of course, is in the way of moving the development of these treatments forward. In fact, phase 3 trials, for example, is 97% of ALS trials have failed. And we are focusing as a company on supporting the developers of drugs and treatments in their journey by providing assessments that can help them really make sense of what is going on with their patients and their interventions in those studies. And we've heard from James Berry, from many others over the course of the last 3 days about the shortcomings of today's assessment, specifically with the primary endpoint ALS-FRS-R, that is not very sensitive and not very responsive. Ernest Frankel was also alluding to this earlier today. So what we do, we are inspired by what actually happens at the clinic when neurologists and speech-language pathologists interview patients. And what we do is that we emulate this process by using a virtual guide, TINA, which many of the people in the audience may have already seen in the past. Many patients that have, for example, gone through the speech study with EverythingALS actually have used TINA in a repeated fashion. She interviews patients and does so in a way that is inspired and very similar to what a speech-language pathologist or a neurologist would do at the clinic. She asked people to respond to certain open-ended questions, describe pictures, repeat sentences, do reading passage, diakinesis, and other things. She also asked patients to describe their problems in their own words. In fact, she, in doing so, measures how patients function and how they feel, both, which is very relevant, of course, for the regulatory concerns and for the concerns of the drug developers specifically. So we look at speech, language, facial movements, body movements, cognition, as well as I mentioned, open-ended questions about their symptoms. And doing so on your own device. What we do is we provide a web application to anyone that has a mobile device or laptop. Anything that's web connected is actually compatible with the modality and TINA. And you don't even have to install any software because we use web technologies. You don't have to remember passwords or credentials. We send a link to the patient and they click on the link. Next thing that happens, you can talk to TINA, making it fully accessible to pretty much everyone who has a device and can interact in that way. Just very briefly, I mentioned we are supporting clinical research exclusively. We have been used in many studies in ALS, particularly in Parkinson's disease. Interventional trials, randomized control trials, many observational studies in which we are one of the leading observational studies, of course, the EverythingALS speech study that we have been supporting over 100 publications in over 150 sites across the globe in 17 countries. And we have touched the lives of over 80,000 patients, almost 80,000 patients with TINA today. And that's in a nutshell. We presented yesterday a full-blown presentation, including the scientific data. But for today's sake, I wanted to keep it brief and look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you very much for each of the presenters. We have about 10 minutes, and I wonder if we could think about questions in areas like concept to deployment, clinical precision versus end user experience, scalability, standardization, and future directions, innovation, call to action. I wonder, Dimitri, what were some of the key challenges you encountered when moving your technology from concept to deployment?
Yeah, so nutrition tracking as an area of data collection historically has been insanely difficult because tracking food is not something that people normally do. This is not as easy as wearing a step tracker, right? It is a very substantial behavioral change for people. And unless people are intrinsically highly motivated to do so, it is historically it's been very difficult. Not everybody would pick up a journal and write things. So even as we started to introduce tools like snap a photo and it logs the meal for you, or narrate it with voice, we are seeing higher and higher adoption. But until this technology starts properly working, the adoption is extremely difficult because nutrition data collection for or nutrition tracking in and of itself is very much counter to what people normally want to do. So this is not something that's ingrained in our nature. And so going against kind of what people normally want to do in their daily lives, it is a challenge. Now, it is significantly lower challenge when we bring the right tools, right? If you can narrate either yourself, or if you're a caregiver, if you can just narrate in the evening everything that a member ate, reduces the barrier of entry. If you can snap a photo, reduces the barrier of entry. And then even after we reduce the barrier of entry, then there is a second challenge that comes into play. There's never been highly accurate nutrition sources of nutrition data. So for many years, we've been collecting large data sets of just food information. Even USDA that provides certain nutrition for thousands and thousands of foods, it's not 100% accurate. And so building and the nutrition industry, the food industry, adds new foods with a lot of new ingredients all the time. So this is a very, very dynamic and evolving area that needs to be properly, that requires just consistent high degree of effort. And the third component, the third part of this, bringing this into the community, because this data has never been collected and there's never been really robust enough studies that are not contradictory to each other, it's very difficult to provide AI-driven recommendation. It's possible, and we are definitely doing this. It makes already an impact, right? But for example, let's say we've got a patient and we recommend them to transition to Mediterranean diet, right? Should this Mediterranean diet include fish or not? Should it include, should it be 20% fat or 25% fat, right? There's the complexity of the space is so huge that providing robust recommendations is not an easy task. All of this becomes easier the more data we collect, right? The more studies we provide, and we're trying to aggregate this into the robust AI systems. But the scale, the entirety of the scale of this challenge, and combined with the human nature of not wanting to eat broccoli, not wanting to take photos of their broccoli, but rather wanting to eat Twinkies and never take photos of them or never record that food. Those are the types of challenges that we are fighting. And in addition to this, the last thing I would say that hopefully is changing right now, there is also the incentive structures are not yet perfectly aligned in our society, as we all as in the healthcare industry know. There is just giant food healthcare industrial complex that does not make it easier, to say the least, with all of the complexity of foods and additives that are being put into the food system. So that's kind of the last piece. There is a little bit of misalignment of incentives, but that would be a much longer conversation.
Well, thank you for that. That's an excellent segue to maybe Alvaro. Could you touch on how you balance the need for clinical precision with usability for consumer or end users? Because he was talking about what their burden was and whether they were tracking correctly. But I would like to hear your thoughts.
It's a great question, Carl, and I think it echoes many of the points we were just hearing about, and everybody has been touching on, right? So adoption and adherence with these metrics is complicated, and it's complicated just because clinicians are used to a certain habit. We like to do what we like to do. We may be willing to accept that it may not be the best, but it's what we're used to. And patients in turn have a hurdle in doing something completely new. There is an appeal initially and then a hard time adhering to it. So I think that the emphasis that you're highlighting of making it as friction-free as possible, as easy to incorporate in either clinician workflow or daily life becomes really critical. And of course, there are low-hanging fruits there, short assessments, easy to capture, forms of information that are easy to share. All that can be very valuable, and I think that we need to use all of them. But I think there is another aspect that is worth considering, which is that as we think about the importance of having reliable, valid metrics, we generally think that the way to do it is through a study. And of course, there is great value in that, and it's critical. But there is also an opportunity that I think we often underestimate of using approaches in clinic, in real world, and to benefit patients now with the limitations and the appropriate disclosures, while leveraging that information to learn fundamental aspects and gain novel insights. And I think that greater integration between clinic guided research, as it were, empowering patients to provide us with data with the appropriate regulatory framework that we can then leverage to understand further, I think would drive us faster further than currently with a much more separate world of research and clinical translation.
Thank you for that. We just have one more minute, so I hate to leave some questions out because there's a really great question about maintaining relevance and driving adoption when working with diverse stakeholders. I just wonder, though, Ernest, if you could give us this future directions, what's your vision for the critical next steps in transitioning from this nice to have to must to have technologies in ALS and beyond?
Yeah, maybe I'll echo Alvaro's comments just now. I think the more, obviously, the three top things we need are more data, and more data, right? But this idea of trying to link together different kinds of data collection, I think, is really critical. Getting better access, making more public data sets so that the whole community can work together to develop the AI tools. And then I also believe that in all of these observational studies, we should try to collect biofluids as well, and being able to connect, because there's going to be a limit to what we can do with just symptomology. We really have to get beyond that and find the connections between the clinical and the molecular.
Well, that wraps us up with this section. I'm sorry we didn't have time for more questions. We can take them through the chat or email afterwards. And thank you, Indu and the team and all of the presenters for the opportunity to moderate this session.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Carl. And I know we're running about 15 minutes late. We're going to try to hurry up here. So thank you for the panel. And the next section that, we want to discuss very quickly is that developing AI tools in ALS. So I'm going to invite my colleague, Steffi Hans, Natalia Lacina, and Sean Peno to come in and kind of, talk to you guys very briefly about what we are developing and the excitement that we feel we want to share very quickly. Steffi?
All right, well, Natalia is sharing. Sean, as the actual expert, as pals and